right, have we got a fantastic interview for you guys today. You might recognize him, Vice President Al Gore at Rebel Headquarters. Great to have you here.
Good to be here.
I remember when Rebel Headquarters used to be at your place.
Well, that's true, and I remember when your Rebel Headquarters used to be a couple blocks from here.
That's right, that's right. The movie is coming out tomorrow. You're not only the former vice president, you're also the star of An Inconvenient Sequel, Truth to Power, let alone all the other accolades. So I saw it in the premiere, and it's powerful, it's moving. Obviously, I want to talk to you about climate change.
Yeah.
We'll talk about other issues as well, but let's start on climate change. So as I look at that, there was a couple of scenes that I thought were overwhelming in being convincing that this is happening. This is happening. Yeah. But you know what's happening out there. Most of the folks watching get it. Most of the American people get it. 60-70%, it's getting into that range. But there's still the holdouts who go, I don't get it. There's snow in the winter. So what is the most compelling evidence that you would present to them if you had 1 minute, 2 minutes with them to convince them that it's actually happening?
Well, every night on the TV news now is like a nature hike through the book of Revelation, and all you really need to do is to connect the dots, even if the mainstream media doesn't want to do it for you. The hottest year ever measured with instruments was last year. The second hottest was the year before that. The third hottest the year before that. It's really overwhelming now. And just in the last 7 years, the U.S. has had 11 once in a 1,000-year events. And that pattern is showing up all over the world. The scientists were right 10 years ago when they projected what was due for us. And because they were right, they even lowballed it a little bit, to tell you the truth, because they're culturally conservative. That should make us all pay careful attention to what they're saying would happen in the future if we did not get this under control.
Well, so I watched An Inconvenient Truth 11 years ago, and despite the fact that I was already well on the way there, I don't know if you remember from our previous conversations, in the 80s and 90s, I wasn't sold. And you know what happened since then? A lot of data.
Yeah.
So you were right, you had seen the data already, and you thought that it was a pattern that was convincing, and that turned out to be true. But now, in the 11 years since Inconvenient Truth, the numbers are overwhelming. You know, as you point out, and there's a powerful scene in the movie with the bell curve, with the red, white, and blue, and the warm temperatures, and how it moves. That right there, that scene is enough. I wish every American could see that scene, just those couple of minutes, and I think that would do it. But yet, one more thing on the skeptics. They'll say, I see the big storms, but come on, when I was a kid, we had storms too. So you say connect the dots, but it's storms, we had storms. What do you mean connect the dots?
Well, the persistent levels of denial among a smaller and smaller minority didn't occur in a vacuum. In Tennessee, there's an old saying, if you see a turtle on top of a fence post, you can be pretty sure it didn't get there by itself. And these levels of denial didn't occur by themselves. The large carbon polluters, the Koch brothers, ExxonMobil, and some others, have spent huge amounts of money, over $1 billion, in using the playbook that was written by the tobacco companies years ago. You'll remember when the doctors connected smoking cigarettes to lung cancer and other diseases of the lung and heart. The tobacco companies hired actors and dressed them up as doctors, put them in front of cameras to say in TV ads all over the airwaves, hi, I'm a doctor. You don't have to worry about any of these problems. And 100 million people died during the 40 years that they delayed the truth that was inconvenient for them. Well, the carbon polluters have hired the same PR firms. There's an amazing book called The Merchants of Doubt that tells this story, documents it thoroughly. They have used the same tactics, and they've used it also to divide Americans by labeling it kind of a partisan issue when it really isn't. It has nothing to do with partisanship. But they have tried to create this climate denial in order to squeeze more profits out of their business plans, which rely on being able to continue to use the sky as an open sewer for 110 million tons of man-made global warming pollution every day. the cumulative amount of man-made global warming pollution that's up there now traps as much extra heat energy in the atmosphere as would be released by 400,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding every day. Now, it's a big planet, but that's an enormous amount of energy, and that's why the temperatures are going up. Most of that heat energy is going into the oceans, by the way, and that's disrupting the water cycle by loading a lot more water vapor coming off the oceans into the sky. The atmospheric rivers take it over the land, and that's why we have these so-called rain bombs now with these record downpours and mudslides and floods. And then between the downpours, the extra heat also makes the droughts start more quickly and go deeper and last longer. And of course, it's melting the ice, and that's why you have sunny day flooding in Miami and Galveston and Norfolk and Fort Lauderdale and Annapolis and worse still in Bangladesh and the Maldives, and I won't go on with the list. But we are largely a coastal species, and the threat of losing coastal towns and cities all over the world is one of many of these problems. And of course, then, I don't want to belabor this, but think about the Zika virus and the other tropical diseases that were never known in this country before. And yes, air travel's had something to do with spreading it, but the climate changes have changed the areas where these diseases take root and become endemic. And when doctors say for the first time in history that women in parts of South and Central America don't get pregnant for 2 years, that ought to set off alarm bells that have nothing to do with politics or partisanship. When American women are told for the first time in history to avoid certain parts of the United States because of these horrible birth defects that can be carried with this virus, it's just all these things together are just overwhelming. But you can't shut down because now we have the solutions. We can solve it.
So there's so many parts of the movie that resonate with me that you alluded to there. I lived in Miami for 3 years, and the part of the movie where Miami's flooded and you're in your big boots, that was right around the corner from where I live.
No kidding.
And I go back to Miami every year because I think it's not going to exist. And so I swear to God, I go every year to soak it in while it's still around.
Yeah.
And so it's not something in the future. It's right now. And when I go, I see more flooding and I see more flooding.
Yeah.
And to the point about the extreme storms and the droughts, that confuses people. They say, how can it be? But there was a great explanation in the movie of why the heat picks up the moisture from the ocean and creates the storms, but also picks up the moisture from the land and creates the droughts.
Right.
So that's why I just thought it was very powerful in that sense. And I'm going to go to a part of the trailer in a second because there's at least a point that I want to make. But you mentioned your opponents there, the people who are trying to stop people from understanding this. I think that a lot of the media treats them as genuine. Meaning, here are these honorable gentlemen who are Republican senators from across the country who earnestly don't believe the science or they think there's a dispute in the science. Do you think they are genuine actors, or do you think that there's systemic corruption that leads to their position?
I mean, I think it's a blend of both, and I'm sure some of them really believe what they're saying. One of the greatest investigative journalists in history over a century ago, Upton Sinclair, once wrote, "It's difficult to get a man to understand something if his income depends upon him not understanding it." You substitute campaign contributions and lobbying gifts for income, it is income in a way, then that's part of the explanation. But I know for a dead certain fact, Cenk, because I served with some of these guys and gals, I know that some of them actually do understand that their positions have been overtaken by unassailable evidence, and they are actually privately trying to figure out how to climb back off the end of the long limb they're on. That is a fact. And some of them are beginning to change now. Not enough yet, but I think the reaction to Trump is actually in some ways kind of making it easier for some of them to change their position. In the House, there's something called the Noah's Ark Caucus now. And it refers not only to the biblical deluge, but also the fact that they can only come by twos. In order to join, you have to have one Democrat and one Republican together. So a lot of Republicans are now joining that. And back to Miami for a moment. The mayor of Miami is a Republican, and he spoke up and said, hey, this has nothing to do with politics. We got a crisis on our hands. We got to solve it.
Yeah, let alone Georgetown, Texas mayor, which is a character in the movie. Speaking of which, because you just touched on both of those things, let's show you a really quick version of the trailer here, and then I want to ask you something about it. Let's watch.
It's supposed to be 70 degrees today. It's freezing here. Speaking of global warming, we need some global warming. It's freezing.
The most criticized scene in the movie An Inconvenient Truth was showing that the combination of sea level rise and storm surge would flood the 9/11 memorial site. And people said, what a terrible exaggeration.
Hurricane Sandy slammed into New York City last night, flooding the World Trade Center site.
Storms get stronger and more destructive. Watch the water splash off the city.
It's time to put America first. That includes a promise to cancel billions in climate change spending. Our plan will end the EPA.
This is our home.
So now you've done so many things to fight back on this issue, and you've done the Climate Reality Project, which you're still doing, which we've talked about. You've trained thousands of people. I don't know if you've gotten to millions yet.
No, over 12,000.
Yeah, and all the things that you did as vice president in the government, et cetera. But when you see that, and you see the opposition has gained the mantle of power and is blocking everything that could help climate change, including getting out of the Paris Accords, which is devastating. Look, I did the math. You're younger than Bernie Sanders. You're younger than Joe Biden.
Here we go.
Younger than Joe Biden, younger than Hillary Clinton, and about the same age, maybe about a year older than Elizabeth Warren. So, and you already won an election. Can I just say, look, I don't know that anybody's ever asked you this, and I don't know if it's right to or not, but you didn't just win the popular vote. According to an entire recount of Florida, you won the Electoral College. So first of all, I'm going to ask a funny question. Do you concede that? Do you concede that you actually won the Electoral College as well?
Well, publicly, I have accepted the responsibility of not challenging the legitimacy of the outcome. But I hear what you're saying. I think people have by now understand what happened, and I wish the Supreme Court had seen it differently.
Yeah. All right. So that is so clear. If you haven't seen it, guys, go Google the articles about the recount of the entire state of Florida that the newspapers did afterwards. So it's devastating, but you're still young.
Yeah.
So
69 is the new 68.
So is there any chance that you think, well, look, the most effective way to do this is through government, and you get back in the saddle?
Well, you know, this might be as good a place as any to no.
For a second,
I joke in the movie that I am a recovering politician, and the longer I go without a relapse, the less likely one becomes. I'm grateful to have found other ways to serve the public interest, and it feels to me like I'm doing what I should be doing right now.
Okay, that wasn't a no. So let me ask one more thing. Forget running for president. I tried. I didn't know you at all, but I wrote articles saying you should do it in 2004. I wrote articles you should do it in 2008. And then after I knew you in 2016. Okay, so let's say I'm past it. But if a real progressive wins and says, "I want you to be the anti-Rex Tillerson," the other guys picked the CEO of ExxonMobil. Yeah. That puts all this carbon into the air. I want you to come clean it up. And boy, as I see John Kerry in the movie, in the Paris Accords, I think that would be amazing for you to do. Is there a possibility that you would do that?
No, I would not do that. But you mentioned John Kerry. It's true, he did an amazing job as Secretary of State. And we went to the Senate on the same day, and I'll tell you, our friendship and partnership over the years was invaluable as we worked together in Paris, and I really admire the job he did.
All right, that was a clear answer. So let's go to Trump. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how's he doing on the issue of climate change? 1 being miserable, 10 being great.
-1. I mean, really, how could it be worse? I mean, I thought there was a chance that he would come to his senses on the issue, but I was very wrong. And he surrounded himself with this rogues gallery of climate deniers, and he's doing as bad as anyone could possibly do.
When you went to Trump Tower to talk to him, what did he say that made you think like maybe? Because you had a tiny bit of hope, not a lot, but a little bit there.
Yeah, no, I actually thought there was a real chance that he would, and I've protected the privacy of the conversations I've had with him, and it didn't stop with that one in Trump Tower. I've had no conversations since his decision on Paris. I don't think there's any reason to continue them. But you've seen articles where business people who've dealt with him will tell you that one-on-one, he's very cordial, and you can come away with the impression that he's open to what you're saying. And I did think there was a chance that he would change. And I thought there was a point where he really had changed a few weeks before his decision on Paris, but the right wing and the carbon polluters, I believe, got to him and locked him in place.
Okay, how about overall, scale of 1 to 10 for his administration so far?
Same score. I mean, I don't know. Well, it could be worse. It's a blend of malevolence and incompetence, and the latter has limited some of the damage that he might otherwise want to do.
Okay, so that's clear. -1. Okay, but I've never seen anything like this. I don't know if anybody's ever seen anything like this. I mean, when he fires Comey, then he talks about firing his attorney general while his attorney general is still in office, pressuring him to resign. I've never seen that. Scaramucci comes out yesterday or last night and says Reince Priebus should be investigated by the FBI. Once the White House communications director, although was chief of staff. Even Nixon didn't do it publicly like this. This is amazing. So what do we do with a problem like Trump? So given that this is unprecedented, I know with Democrats, I presume if he fires Mueller are gonna say, hey, we gotta take action right now. Do you think the Republicans will take action, and what would the action be? Would it be impeachment? What would you do? What could we do if he fires Mueller?
Well, for me, the biggest problem is that all these things are distractions from what the president ought to be doing. Nothing's getting done. Certainly nothing good is getting done. And every day it's a new set of tweets, a new set of distractions, and that's one of the biggest tragedies of this whole show, the reality show that's going on there. Now, as for the investigation and all the suspicions people have, I'm going to leave that to Robert Mueller. I think the country is extremely fortunate to have an independent counsel who has the complete respect of just about everybody I've heard comment on it in both political parties. I mean, it's a privilege for us as Americans to have somebody like that in charge. And let's say that the investigation finds out that he didn't do anything wrong. There wasn't collusion. There wasn't. Because it's Mueller, I would be able to accept that because I trust the guy. He has integrity. By the same token, if he comes to the opposite conclusion, I think that conclusion will also be accepted. And I think it's very interesting that the Republican senators who have been unnaturally quiet and acquiescent in the face of all these things Trump has been doing, all of a sudden when he attacks Sessions, who they served with, and I was in the Senate and I know the importance of camaraderie when it's established there, they're now drawing a red line. And I think that my best guess is that the next few months may be ones that are filled with challenges for our democracy, and we should gird ourselves for it. I'm going to wait, as I said, for what Mueller's investigation uncovers, I feel confident that he will be allowed to continue. I think the Senate will protect him. And then we'll see where it goes from there.
And I want to dive into some of the issues that are going on.
Great.
Okay. So California earlier this week passed cap and trade.
Yeah.
So now that's actually an extension of an earlier legislation. It was supposed to go to 2020, but we're almost there. So they extended it to 2030.
Yeah.
And it was a really nice moment. If you guys didn't see, Jerry Brown and Arnold Schwarzenegger were together, and they raised each other's hands because Schwarzenegger is on the right side of that issue.
Yeah,
and so tell us what that cap and trade does in California and why it's so important.
Well, first of all, it makes Jerry Brown one of the preeminent leaders on this issue in the world. I admire Jerry a lot, and I know there was a little criticism of this detail or that detail, and I get it, but wow, to be able to accomplish that is amazing. And he got 8 Republican members of the legislature, some from very conservative districts, and several Republican governors of other states endorsed the legislation. So what it does is put a price on carbon through the cap and trade mechanism. It greatly benefits Canada as well, because Ontario has joined. Quebec has already joined. Ontario is about to. Mexico. 3 weeks ago, I was in Australia, and I've worked with Chair. I took 4 letters from him to the premiers of the 4 largest states in Australia. It's the same deal there. They got a federal government that doesn't have its act together, but the state governments have a lot of the levers of power. So California is really kind of leading the way in the U.S., but you got a lot of other states too. So it's a very important accomplishment.
Is cap and trade the right way to tackle this issue?
You know, if I had my druthers, I would have a tax on carbon and cap and trade and regulations like requiring a certain percentage from renewables going up each year. But the resistance to a tax of any kind, of course, because of the way the ideological debate has been shaped, makes it easier in most jurisdictions to go for the indirect price on carbon, which cap and trade is. Even in China, by the way. I have a close friend there, Xie Jinhua, who is their top climate guy, who works for Xi Jinping. They floated a carbon tax in China, and it met with a lot of resistance from the regional industrial leaders. Of course, it's a dictatorship, but not totally. They pay attention to opinion. So they diverted to a cap and trade there as well. Sweden, probably doing the best job of any country, has both cap and trade and a carbon tax. And eventually, I hope we will have a carbon tax. A revenue neutral carbon tax is something I've supported for more than 25 years. But when I realized that was an almost impossible sell, I said, okay, second best is cap and trade, let's do that. The first President Bush had done that to stop sulfur dioxide and help cure acid rain, and it worked better than a lot of us expected it would. So let's say, well, let's do that. That's when we started this effort, and the Republican authors of the first cap and trade plan immediately switched and said, no, you're for it, now we're against it. Not saying that to me, but to the Democrats who were there then.
Well, where have I seen that movie before? The Heritage Foundation proposed a health care
there you go,
plan.
same thing.
Right, and once the Democrats—
Good catch.
Right, say they're in favor of it, all of a sudden they're not. Which actually then leads to a hot issue also in California. So very recently they decided to pass single payer in the California Senate, but couldn't quite get it done in the Assembly. Curious to your take on the issue: single payer, Medicare-for-All. What's your stance on this?
Well, throughout my career in government back in the day, I was kind of skeptical about single payer. I thought the hybrid system, public-private, could work. Starting in 2002, I came to the conclusion that we should go to single payer. Medicare-for-All would be an easy way to do it. I just think that the current system, I'm all for Obamacare, AHCA as it's called, but the Republicans are trying to undermine that, and when and if we get to the point where we have to rework it again, I would be strongly in favor of going to single payer.
All right, great. And then I want to play you a clip from Lindsey Graham today because he says something very interesting about the Mueller investigation.
Okay.
So let's take a look at that and then react. This happened just today.
There will be no confirmation hearing for a new attorney general in 2017. If Jeff Sessions is fired, there will be holy hell to pay. Any effort to go after Mueller could be the beginning of the end of the Trump presidency, unless Mueller did something wrong.
Okay, so those are very strong words.
Yeah, very. Yeah.
What's your level of faith that the Republican senators will follow through on that threat if he fires Mueller?
Well, Lindsey Graham is sometimes out over his skis where the rest of the Republican caucus is concerned, but the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Chuck Grassley, put out a tweet just the day before saying he's not going to have any hearings on any new attorney general this year. Ben Sass of Nebraska put out a tweet saying, if you're thinking about a recess appointment to replace Sessions, forget about it, directed at Trump. And I've heard interviews with quite a few Republican senators who are all saying similar things. So my guess is that this sentiment expressed by Lindsey Graham is not just him or not just him and John McCain. I think it appears to be representative of what the Republicans in the Senate generally are thinking and saying.
All right, one last question for you, and it is about the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
So we talked about some of the issues, climate change, single payer. Some are counseling. I read an article the other day, the Blue Dog Democrats are back, and they're saying let's go to the center, and that's why we're losing. And they are losing. They've lost the House, the Senate, the White House, the Supreme Court, and 69 out of 99 state legislatures. Now, of course, there's the progressive wing saying, no, let's fight for the positions we believe in, and let's go stronger in that direction. What do you make of that? Which direction do you think they should go?
Well, when I ran this the last time for president, my slogan was for the people, not the powerful, and a lot of people criticized that as leaning too far toward the progressive side. But it just seems to me, with rising inequality in incomes and net worths, and also the inequality of political power, our democracy's been hacked by big money long before the Russians hacked it. And we need to right the ship. We need to restore American democracy, and I think the way to do it is to really go to the people and say, we're for you, and we're not gonna to bend to the will of these wealthy and powerful poobahs. Bernie Sanders' campaign, whether you agree with his agenda or not, just looking at the mechanics of it, he accomplished something that I think is really significant beyond politics and ideology. He proved that it now is possible in 2016, 2017, 2018, 2020 to run a very credible, potentially winning campaign without taking any special interest money, any big fat cat contributions, just going out on the internet and trying to motivate the average citizens of this country to finance the campaign with small donations. That's the way it should be. And I think that the internet and social media have now evolved to the point where that really is possible. And that possibility gives me tremendous hope that we may be able to rekindle the spirit of America and reinvigorate the way our democracy is intended to operate. And that's best done by going to the people with solutions that speak to them and don't, bend over to be so careful with all these powerful special interests.
Correct me if I'm wrong, the first bill you ever introduced was about getting money out of politics?
Yeah, I mean, every time when I was first elected to the House of Representatives, I introduced legislation to have 100% federal funding of all federal elections. It was part of the platform in every campaign I ran in the House, in the Senate, both times I ran for president. I was never really attacked on it, Cenk, because they couldn't get people to believe that I would propose such a thing. But I really believe that's one of the secrets. Now, it's hard to get something like that passed. I'm not naive about it. But I really do think that getting big money out of politics is absolutely essential to save the America that we know and love.
I thought I was early on it, but you introduced that bill when?
1977.
So you might have figured out things a little quicker than, and not only me, but the rest of the country.
I'm a lot older than you.
So climate change, money in politics, all these issues, you're way out ahead. I hope that people learn from that. And as one last thing, as I watched the movie, this is for you guys, I kept thinking, how many times does the guy have to be proven right before you go, maybe I should listen to him, right?
Did I mention the website, Cenk?
I don't think you did.
Inconvenientsequel.com. You can buy advance tickets. It opens in Los Angeles this Friday, tomorrow, and New York. And then a week from tomorrow, August 4th, it opens wide all across the country. And you got viewers around the world. This movie is going to be playing in countries around the world. And use your voice, use your vote, use your choices in life. Be a part of the solutions and go to see this movie, An Inconvenient Sequel, Truth to Power.
Yes. So the other thing is get involved. Climate Reality Project, and the first thing to do in getting involved is actually seeing what's going on. If you didn't see Inconvenient Truth, go back see Inconvenient Truth, and then go see Inconvenient Sequel, and it's stark.
Thank you.
Yes.
People come away hopeful. They come away hopeful, but also with an increased sense of urgency.
Yeah, and there was literally a couple of times where I gasped. You know, the scene with the station in Greenland.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then the next year they come back and the ice is gone, and I was like, so Inconvenient Sequel, check it out. Vice President Gore, thank you so much for being here.
Cenk.
Really appreciate it. Young Turks members get to watch every single interview live as it happens. TYTnetwork.com/join.